Patriots, and welcome to the Q Lounge Live. Hi, I'm your host, Shady Groove, and this is the In the Matrix channel. It is just after 9 p.m. on the East Coast, 6 p.m. on the West Coast. It is Friday night. Hope everybody's hearing me out there. Hope we're coming in 5-5, you guys. Wow, what a couple of weeks it has been. You guys out there on the chat, please, everybody come around. Understand that this is a really complicated thing that we are talking about here. I want to thank all the great moderators out there. I want to thank intheMatrixxx with 3 X's. Also, I see him out there in the chat. Thanks, you guys, for all the support that you have been this past year. This year upcoming is going to be pretty incredible. I think everybody out there is starting to see the comms and starting to really understand what we're talking about whenever we're talking about Q, whenever we're talking about your president, whenever we're talking about our individual freedom, our freedom as man, flesh and blood man walking this earth, our freedom as Americans under the Constitution, your Constitution. They are coming after your Constitution in a way that has never been tried before. It's not, the people aren't any different. They're the same people that were coming after your Constitution 150 years ago, 200 years ago. They're still coming today. They want you gone. And when I say that, I don't mean that lightly. They want all of us gone. Tired of you guys being loud. They're tired of you guys speaking up. They're tired of you guys making noise. They're tired of you guys standing there and saying, hey, why do you keep ignoring the truth? Why do you keep ignoring the truth? It seems like Everybody keeps just skimming right over the reality of what it is that we are doing as a nation, what it is that freedom really means. That's a big, big discussion. And the news media and your pundits on TV, nobody seems to really care. Nobody seems to really want to share the real information. Nobody wants to tell you what actual communism is. Nobody wants to tell you who the people are, the players in the game behind the scenes that are running the shots and running the show. Everyone seems to be completely oblivious to exactly what it is that's going on. We go over all of this stuff with Q and all of the different Anon decoders out there. Everyone has worked together so hard only to sit there and watch all the people in the news completely ignore the truth, even though that it's been provided for them. Ample proof has been provided for them, whether it's the relevance of Q or whether it's the relevance of our history or whether it's the relevance of the deep state coup attempt on your president. That is what you're seeing. This week we got the impeachment papers sent over. Real quick, right up front, I would like to say thank you to the great moderators in the chat out there. These guys work tirelessly to bring you amazing information during our shows, the Matrix Groove Hour and this show here, and to provide you with information that you take from us. And we'll be providing links as we go through the show from the chat. The chat is here connected to the show, and these links you'll be able to use to do your own research and to see if you come to some of the same conclusions that we do. But here on the Q Lounge Live, we like to think of this as a circle. Like to think of this as us coming together to have a chat, to get updated on what's happening not only with Q, but what's happening with your history and how is it connected to the modern world. Now, you're seeing a lot of stuff out there about Iran. You're seeing a lot of stuff out there about Israel. You're seeing a lot of stuff out there about Ukraine and North Korea and Canada and the UK and all their cooperation. Funny thing to me is I don't understand how anyone can't stand up and ask the question, like, where did Iran get uranium? Where did Iran get uranium? Why does nobody seem very concerned about that? They just keep saying, oh, well, they're making weapons. But not really concerned about where did they get the material to make the weapons with. So week before last, Matrix and I did a 3.5-hour show on the Matrix Groove Hour where we went over every single Q post connected to Iran and how it's relevant to your current reality and how it plays into what it is we're talking about today. Q says the news unlocks the map being the drops, the map being multiple different things. But reality is that the news cycle in the future will predict or will substantiate the Q drops in the past. Now, all the people out there on the other side of the aisle, on the other side of Q, the MAGA people who are anti-Q and all these folks, they don't really understand this message. They don't really understand what you're saying. So give them some room to breathe whenever you're explaining stuff and give them some room to understand that maybe not everything that you're saying is exact fact, even though it's a fact. We want to present things in a way to where other people can see the truth. Don't present things in a way that is so convoluted and you get too deep about trying to explain too much stuff, and then all of a sudden you get lost and confused and you are caught in crossfires of questions and things that you can't answer. But everything is convoluted, and I use that word a lot whenever we're talking about this stuff, and whenever we're talking about what's our real history, what's our real world, what's our real goal to expose the truth. Who are we really trying to expose? How long have we been fighting them? How much time has passed since what? You know, you saw almost, they were calling it World War III last week. You seeing World War III? How are the predictive Nostradamuses of the media? They're not doing a very good job for you, are they? Seems like everything that they bring to us is wrong. It's inaccurate, or there's some type of spin on it, right? And they don't really care to admit to you that they're spinning the information. And even our quote-unquote conservative news isn't bringing you the information. How much Fox News coverage did they get for the Project Veritas reveals this week? What is communism really? And is it creeping into our society? One quick thing that I just saw on Tucker Carlson right before we came on the air was that there's this plan in Washington, D.C. to divide Washington, D.C. up into 127 states. Each neighborhood becomes a state. Therefore, by giving them another, 250 House members and another 125 senators? Whoa, what a plan, huh? There is no status of state on Washington, D.C. for multiple reasons. One of the reasons of the control centers of Washington, D.C. being the main military or defense arm of the globalist agenda, or the three prongs: the Vatican, the City of London, and Washington, D.C. But also, when the Constitution was written, whenever the Washington was being formed, it was formed outside of the purview of a state for a reason. We didn't want Washington, D.C. to have a state status for the simple reason of how the swamp thinks and what the swamp does. So the D.C. area trying to become 127 states. Interesting. Wow. Boy, they sure could overwhelm your Congress and Senate real quick like that. They have a disdain and a despise. They despise your country. Yeah, I said it. They hate the idea of America. They hate it. They hate the idea of freedom, and they hate the idea for you guys being able to think for yourselves as Americans, and they hate the Q reality of someone making you think for yourself, someone bringing up topics that entice you to think for yourself. They don't want any of that. What they want is clean, mean, well-oiled machine that brings you the propaganda right to your TV, nice and pretty and super HD, so that you sit there and you don't question it. If that is happening, then what their plan is working, isn't it? So how do you begin to talk to people about any of this stuff is very complicated. And a lot of the things that we discuss are very complicated. And the things that we're getting ready to discuss, even on tonight's program, are complicated. Maybe we don't have all the answers, but we are going to dig into this, and we're going to take a look, and we're going to give you a little bit of background on some of these events that have happened over the last 120 years, and a little bit of a history lesson on what is communism again. And I think more than anybody on the internet have done show after show after show about trying to explain to people what communism really is. None of your political professors can figure it out. They don't understand it. But it's very, very simple. It's a Luciferian global attempt to take over the world. A cult-like structure that has embedded itself within your civilization and controls all maintenances and arms of reality. Governments and financial institutions, universities, think tanks, academics across the planet. Every single entity that attacks your duly elected president works for it. Simple. And what you just saw this week with the Bernie Sanders campaign and the James O'Keefe Project Veritas leaks, you are seeing communism front and center. And we're going to talk a good bit about that tonight and how did we get here? How did we really get here to a point where a central banking cabal controls every bit of our financial strings, and everybody who it works and lives in America has to work 2 jobs or 40 hours a week every week of the year, and hopefully there's enough left at the end of the year to buy someone a Christmas present. And if not, you're going to have to pay it back whenever tax time comes around. Is that really the life that we're supposed to be living? Is that really who we're supposed to be? We have a lot of work to do here, ladies and gentlemen. A lot of work still to come and a lot of stuff to still discuss. But the truth of the matter is, we are winning. That is the truth. And I don't care what any of the media pundits say. I don't care what any of the naysayers say. the American people, for the first time in my lifetime, are winning the war on information, because you're actually looking for the information. You're going to find the information. You want the information. And the last thing in the world that they want you to do is to find, want, and seek out the real information. Communist Manifesto, the 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto: abolition of private property in land and application of all rents of land to public purpose. A heavy, progressive, or gradual income tax. Abolition of all rights of inheritance. Confiscation of the property of all immigrants and rebels. Centralization of credit in the hands of the state by means of a national bank with state capital and an exclusive monopoly. Seen one of those? Federal Reserve System created by the Federal Reserve Act in 1913 is indeed such a national bank. Matter of fact, that was the third attempt at a nationalized bank. Centralization of the means of communication and transportation in the hands of the state. U.S. communication and transportation are controlled and regulated by the Federal Communications Commission, established by the Communications Act of 1934. Department of Transportation, Interstate Commerce Commission, established 1887. Federal Aviation Administration, Executive Order 11490, 10-0 or 10999, not to mention various state bureaucracies, regulations. There's also the federal postal monopoly, Amtrak, Conrail, outright socialist, government-owned enterprise, instead of free market private enterprise in these important industries. Now, we take that and we show you that Facebook was created by DARPA. We show you that Twitter was created by DARPA. We show you that Amazon was created by DARPA. We show you all of these tools that you own and have created that are being used by the state to surveil you. 7, extension of factories and instruments of production owned by the state, the bringing into cultivation of wastelands, and the improvement of the soil generally in accordance with the common plan. While the U.S. does not have the vast collective farms which failed so miserably, we nevertheless do have a significant degree of government involvement in agriculture. And it is grotesque. Whenever you take into account the sugar lobby and you take into account all the EPA and the regulations, they have made farming something that doesn't look like something you would like to do, when in fact, most of the wealth in America was generated from using your property to create your wealth. Now, everybody's crammed up into a city structure where you barely have enough room to go outside, and you're lucky if you can step outside without someone looking at you. Where did the land that your parents and your grandparents and your forefathers, where did the land that they owned go? Back to the state, under state control, removed from you per regulations. 8, equal obligation of all to work, establishment of industrial armies, especially for agriculture. 9, combination of agriculture with manufacturing industries and a gradual abolition of the distinction between town and country by a more equitable distribution of the population over the country. And 10, the re-education for all children in government schools, abolition for children's factory labor in its present form, and combination of education with industrial production. Now, we have the Communist Manifesto, which to me is the specific reality of all systems controlled by the state. But for some reason, the people in academics and the people in your media can't understand that communism is the actual antithesis to a constitutional republic. Not necessarily capitalism, a constitutional republic, creating a free market that has been tagged with the stereotype of capitalism. But in all reality, it simply means your pursuit of happiness, your pursuit of what it is you want to do. So this plan to insert the Communist Manifesto in your government in America is well underway and has been running for a long time. And so we have to dig back into time to start to understand where this come from, who are these people, and what in the world are they doing in the modern reality, in our today world. What are they doing? Where are they? A couple of weeks ago, we went over the 3 world wars and who was Albert Pike, and very, very plainly explaining to you about how they're going to organize 3 world wars. They weren't hiding it. This was a specific plan to pit religious group against religious group and have the religions take each other out, leaving chaos in the world for them to rule over like kings. Notice that they keep saying your president's not a dictator. He's not a dictator. Isn't that interesting how they consistently call him what it is they are? The only person to hold that office who speaks up for America in a way that is strong, very strong. Your past is relevant to your future because these programs and this thought form is the only way they can control you. If you decide to make amends with someone who you have been divided from and you become together, that's bad for them. They want you separated by any ism. If you're male, if you're female, they don't even want you to be able to tell what's the difference between a male and a female anymore. There is no difference. That's what they tell you. There's no difference. There is no reason to prevent grown men from going into ladies' rooms where children are. No. Oh, you shouldn't be judgmental of someone who is attracted sexually to children. Really? That's the norm? Where does this all come from? How did we get here? And this is the tweet I did the other day. Curious how to get the Mockingbird media to publicly support terrorists on the news? Simple. Kill their general. White hat, Hegelian dialectic. Problem. Mainstream media are traitors that hate our country. Reaction. You can't kill our guy. Solution. We the people wake up. If you've at all watched these marauders or usurpers on the news consistently calling Soleimani a revered general on multiple news outlets, they referred to him as this. Now, we are Q. You are Q. You have the information. You understand what the game is. You understand what we're chasing. Was this man a revered general to any of my wonderful Anon friends out here? Over 600 dead Americans and pretty much the inventor of the roadside bomb. Hundreds, if not thousands, of vets walking around America without limbs. Why were we there? Why were our troops there? Why were any of our people in the Middle East ever, if not to have targets, to be targets? They're there to be targets. They're there to continue this division of nations. They're there to perpetuate hatefulness. They're there to incite war. War is big business. And they want the third one to kick off. And it would be kicked off had we not been so lucky to have elected this wonderful president who is just, it's something to revere. It's something really to revere. It's something to behold of, something to awaken to, like, wow, who is he speaking for every day if he's not speaking for me and my country? So what you had was, you had all of these media companies talking about Soleimani, and I don't really care which one it was, but isn't it interesting that these people defended Soleimani in the same way they defended Brennan, they defended Comey, they defended Lisa Page, they defended Valerie Jarrett, they defended Peter Strzok? But at no point did they ever reveal to you all of those people's connections and influences in Iran. And all of them connected to the overarching plan, which is to drive planet Earth into a worldwide globalist dictatorship where you are nothing to them, and you, especially you here in America, you're the only ones left that can stand up to them. There's no other country on the face of the earth that has the ability to stand up to them with real guns, with real passion for their country. We don't want it to go away. We don't want it to go anywhere. We don't want the systems changed. We don't think it's archaic. Quite the opposite. So within Q and within everything that we've been doing and working on, you guys are seeing people wake up to this and to know that we've got all of these people, Strzok, Page, Brennan, Jarrett, Huma Abedin, Hillary's right-hand person from the mid-90s, Huma Abedin of Harvard University Muslim Association, connected to Obama whenever he was in school, Ben Talil from Saudi Arabia. They want you to think that Saudi Arabia and Iran and all these Middle Eastern countries, they want you to think that they're all divided and mad at each other and fighting each other. But the truth of the matter is they have been coordinating with the deep state on planet Earth with the trust to steal everything. We're going to get into a little bit of the history of this right now. Historical background up until 1900 of Persia. British interest in the Persian Gulf originated in the 16th century and steadily increased as British India's importance rose to the imperial system of the 18th and 19th century. In the beginning, the agenda was primarily of a commercial character. Realizing the region's significance, the British fleet supported the Persian emperor in expelling the Portuguese in 1622. In return, the British East India Company was permitted to establish a trading post in the coastal city of Bandar Abbas, which became their principal port in the Persian Gulf, empowered by the Charter of Charles II in 1661. The company was responsible for conducting British foreign policy in the Persian Gulf, as well as concluding various treaties and agreements and engagements with Persian Gulf states in the capacity of the Crown's regional agent. In 1763, the British East India Company established a residency at Bushehr in the Persian side of the Persian Gulf. This was followed by another residency in Basar. Several years later, arrival of Persia in 1807 of a large French mission under General Gradane galvanized the British both in London and Calcutta. They responded by sending a mission under Sir Harford Jones, which resulted in establishing the preliminary treaty of friendship and alliance with the Shah in 1809. And despite being modified during subsequent negotiations, this treaty provided the framework within which Anglo-Persian foreign relations operated for the next half-century. Britain appointed Harford Jones as the first resident envoy to the Persian court in 1808, and until the appointment of Charles Allison as minister in Tehran in 1860, the envoy of his staff were, with rare exceptions, almost exclusively recruited from the East India Company. A little bit of history there. Iran under their own control? Just a blip of the Ottoman Empire? The world is just happens the way it's supposed to happen. There's nothing, there's no man behind the curtain. 1622. The beginning of us controlling that part of the world. I set to work to read the Act of Parliament in which the Bank of England was created in 1694. The inventors knew well what they were about. Their design was to mortgage by degrees the whole of the country, all the lands, all the houses, and all the property, and even all labor to those who would lend their money to the state. The scheme, the crafty, the cunning, the deep scheme was produced what the world never saw before: starvation in the midst of plenty. Do you see that on the streets of San Francisco? Do you see that on the streets of Chicago? Starvation in the midst of plenty? To begin any study of money and credit, especially credit money, it is important to understand that the historical roots and the people and the motivations involved. Events are not as random as some believe, and events that may appear unrelated must be examined as they relate to the overall goals and objectives of those directing these events. For example, we must ask if there is any relation to the Rothschild-controlled Bank of Kuhn and Laub and Company, being the driving force behind the creation and control of the U.S. Federal Reserve Act in 1914, financing the Trotsky and Lenin in 1917, and financing of Hitler in 1933. Are these random events, or do they encompass some overall plan? I say they encompass an overall plan. Most people don't understand that Russia, the czars of Russia, supported the American colonies breaking away, supported the American colonies in their fight against Britain. Did you know that? Did you know that part of the reason that they destroyed the family in the early 1900s in Russia were because they helped America break free of the central banking structure? This structure of debt, which existed prior to your country, was what people were trying to get away from. That's why your money was such the focus with the Constitution. We're not talking about different players here. As we consider this question, let's first look at the origins of credit and money, the historical consequences of this development, and the effects that credit money continues to have on our daily lives. Most significant event in 2,000 years since the birth of Christianity, sole guardian of the faith was the Catholic Church, which exercised considerable control over the beliefs of much of the civilized world at the time. And the Catholic Church was sold in the mid-1800s to the Paysor Trust. Why does Q say those you trusted the most? What have they been busy doing behind your back across our country in churches and synagogues from coast to coast, to insert and to blackmail and to compromise our religious structure, as to make them appear to you hypocritical, so that you can't lay your faith there? Debt is not money. Debt is a slave system. It's a completely slave system that does not work to the benefit of the debtor. I want to jump over here to this article, which was November 4th of 2015, but it paints a decent picture here in the first couple paragraphs. I want to read, where was I at? I think I got lost here right before the show. The tabs went away. British government bought oil at a considerable discount from APOC, and by adding the taxation it received from the company, oil price was actually close to zero for this country. Therefore, the British government immediately converted the oil fuel. British government began to throw its support behind APOC with indirect financial assistance and political backing in 1909, thanks to the cheap Iranian oil. British Navy became mightier during the two world wars, and in their colonial conquest in the face of its rivals, oil soon became a strategic asset for political dominance of Britain over the world, as Britain was at the time in possession of the biggest refinery in the world. Abadan refinery in Iran, 1909. When was the World Wars? After that. So as what Q has been saying, and what we are trying to say to bring to the people who don't seem to care, we know Iran was controlled before the war, before the First World War. How do we know that? Because there couldn't have been a world war had there not been some comparative reserve of fuel or oil to compete with America. And what you've systematically watched over the last 100 years is the depletion of our ability to process, manage, and maintain our fuel supply so that we're dependent on foreign oil. What you saw in World War II was a false flag event to insert control over the Middle East. 100-year plan. And simultaneously make you, the American citizens, the responsible party in financing said project. So whenever your mainstream news goes all crazy over the top about, all of the brave soldiers who went to World War I and World War II, what they're not telling you is that they sent them there without merit, much like Vietnam, much like Iraq. It was a proxy war. It was a way to weaken you. It was a way to divide you. It was a way to strangle your ability and your institution's ability to disseminate, refine, and discuss the truth. Everything is a conspiracy theory. We have to go back to see forward. In order to gain a much tighter control on Iran politically and economically, the British proceeded to have the 1919 agreement being signed, but at this time they were faced with the democratic institution called Majlis. According to 1906 Iranian constitution, parliamentary approval was necessary for every agreement to make it binding and operative, but thanks to the British illegal actions and bribery, they managed to strike a deal with the Iranian government and the king and managed to circumvent the ratification by the parliament to get the agreement. That sound familiar? Similar to how you got an income tax? To get the agreement, the British started to bribe the Crown Princess, Prime Minister, and the king. And they even started to exert their influence on the Iranian parliament by dictating the candidates who were favorable to them. So much like your country here in America, they did the same thing to Iran. Except they got the Iran under their full control in the late 50s, whenever the final bunch of clowns were in control of every aspect of their government. Now they sit there as the boogeyman, pretend boogeyman. Where did Iran get uranium? Why does Iran appear in the Q post 71 times, I think it was, 70-something times? Because it connects to everything that has to do with your real history. It connects to all of it. In this article, this from away from the Western Front, let's take a little read on this. Persia, now Iran, little known as a theater of the First World War, but events there influenced global politics in the years following the war. Although Persia declared its neutrality in 1914, interesting, right? Neutral. It was too important strategically for Britain, Russia, and the Ottoman Empire and Germany to leave it alone, and as the British diplomat wrote, Persia during the war had been exposed to violations and sufferings not endured by any other neutral country. Furthermore, oil had been discovered in Persia shortly before the war, with the first exports starting in 1912. Britain had decided to replace coal with oil for its navy, making for faster, lighter ships, but committing Britain to importing fuel rather than relying on home-produced coal. Now, how does energy and energy independence strengthen your nation? Why does your president consistently talk about over and over again that we are a net exporter of oil? What he's doing is he's thumbing his nose at these deep state players and telling them to their faces that you are no longer relevant. You no longer mean anything to us. We don't need oil from under the sand by way of blood on top of it. Your Constitution says we shall not get involved in foreign skirmishes and wars. Do you believe that? And of everything that's happened, Pearl Harbor was the closest thing to us being attacked since the War of 1812. But we still have to go out and nation build? Why is Donald Trump not nation building? Why is Donald Trump fighting China? How is China connected to Iran? Long-term plan. The big plan. The very, very big plan. Revolution in December of 2005 resulted in the introduction of the modern reforms. 2 years later, Russia and Britain negotiated a new agreement with the Persian government. The Anglo-Russian Entente divided the country into a sphere of interest, giving Britain economic control of the south and Russia the north. And before all this happened, Persia was Persia. Persia included Saudi Arabia. Persia included Syria. Persia included Iraq and Iran, the whole area. But much like everything else, a divide and conquer tactic has been applied to them, and they have been systematically decimated from the inside out. Exactly 100% what they're trying to do to you. Big difference is you are a well-armed public. The big difference is you believe that you have the right as a man or woman of flesh and blood to seek your happiness. However you see wish, as long as it doesn't impair or impugn or intrude on another human being's rights to do so. Allowing us to participate in a free market of ideas and goods. So why is Soleimani so revered by your media? After learning a bunch of this stuff and understanding how Brennan and Strzok and Page and Huma Abedin and the Harvard University Muslim Association and all these people, remember that's Huma, all capital letters, are connected. And what is the game that they're really running on us? What is the game? 1890, occult revival. A large variety of occult or esoteric groups and philosophies existed in German-speaking lands from the 1890s to the 1920s, and the occult roots of Nazi